the unified government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting of the neighborhood. Everyone, that public comment is welcome on any item that is up before the committee this evening. If you wish to make a public comment, you'll come to the podium in the center of the room and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments to the committee. Once again, we do ask that anyone here present please speak as directly as possible into a microphone for accurate recording and broadcast purposes. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters. Here. Murguia. Townsend.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. We did have, get back to my correct agenda here, we did have a blue sheet that was added to this agenda and item number 3 after the agenda was originally published, and so just to make sure that everybody has their blue sheet, item number 3, a grant for the from the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City. That's the only change to the agenda from its original publication. Our first item of business is to approve our standing committee minutes from the meeting of August 20th, 2018.
Move for approval. Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve those minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted. That takes us to our committee agenda. Item number 1 is land bank business. I'll turn this meeting over to, are we switching the order of the agenda? All right. So we're going to switch the order of the agenda tonight, and what was last shall become first. When we got the blue sheet, it said a new item number 3, so I just assumed it was going third in order. Let's put it to the beginning. So committee, if you'll flip to the blue sheet, please. This is a grant from the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City, and so I will turn this over to Andrea Genero.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay.
The Livable Neighborhoods Task Force actually applied for a grant with the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City, but the Livable Neighborhoods Office with the Unified Government is asked to be their fiscal agent. The Health Foundation would like for us to be their fiscal agent, so we did apply for a grant for $73,000. We were awarded a $50,000 grant. There is no match for this. staff time devoted to this grant, but no match. And we just need your approval to accept it.
This would be, so better turn mine on. And so this effort would be in support of the Community Health Improvement Plan as was submitted a couple of weeks ago at our special session, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. What the grant would be for is to hire a consultant to come and help assist with coordinating the Safe and Affordable Housing Committee for the Community Health Improvement Plan's Safe and Affordable Housing Group.
So that was one of the 4 efforts of the
Yes.
whole Community Health Improvement Plan. Does any member of the committee have a question or a comment for Ms. Genero or a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval. Is there any further discussion or any comment?
I do like grants with no match.
Grants with no match are a blessing. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you so much. Forward to progress in terms of the health improvement plan. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Slaughter for land bank business.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, we'll get right into it. We have a few items tonight. We're going to start with some transfers. We have 2 transfers that we'd like to see come to the land bank. It is 4714 Vista Street, and that was being transferred from the Argentine Betterment Corporation, and 327 South Bokey Street. It's a Board of County Commissioner property. 4714 Vista, it's highlighted here in black. Back in 2015, when we first started looking at the idea of land bank receiving houses, we were approached by Wells Fargo as a donation of this property. So you guys approved that donation request. We got it inspected. It was in really rough shape. And so we were approached by ABC about if property was demoed, that they would like to construct a new house on it. So the demo took place, it was knocked down, and now we have a new house constructed on the property. And this is just some pictures of the finished product here. Picture of the front, kitchen area, bath, living room space. So they had a buyer lined up. They were ready to close on it when it was found out through a title search that one of the original mortgage, one of the original mortgages was never released properly. So we in ABC tried to reach them and get this released, and we basically came up with no luck. If we did reach them, they just didn't know the proper ways to get this handled. So the suggestion was to donate it back to the land bank, where through our legal department, we'll do a quiet title action to get everything released. And then upon that, which will also be another request tonight, upon the completion of that, then we will transfer it back to ABC for them to go ahead and close on the property and sell it. The other property we're asking to come to us is highlighted here. It is 327 South Bokey. The applicant here at 323 has submitted an application, but it's needs to get transferred to the land bank before we can actually move forward with the application.
And this is one of those many properties that really should be in the land bank, but historically has been titled either as Board of Commissioners or City of Kansas City, Kansas. So this is one of the group that we're working systematically to move over into the land bank anyway, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'd love to see that property owner get that, because 327 is in rough shape.
And so that's the request, is to have those 2 transferred to the land bank.
Move for approval of those 2 properties.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve those 2 transfers as submitted. Any further discussion?
Just for clarity, Chairman, I do not work for ABC. A lot of people confuse that. I'm not employed by ABC, so I will be voting on this.
Correct. Any other comment? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Okay, next we have two transfers from the land bank. We have 1126 South 39th Street, and we have again the 4714 Vista Street. This property here, 1126 South 39th, it was brought to our attention actually by one of our rehabbers, who was also an engineer, and said that someone he knew had purchased this property from one of the recent tax sales and wasn't able to pull permits because half of their property is on a land bank property. So the ask tonight would be is to just go ahead and transfer the land bank property, which is located right here to the south of it, to Mr. Barrera, so he can go ahead and complete the renovations.
No.
And then, of course, we're also asking, once the quiet title action is done, is to have that transferred back,
Just to pre-authorize that.
instead of having to bring it back and wait for a scheduled meeting.
Okay. Any,
For approval of those two properties.
there's a motion for approval.
Second?
There's a second. Now Commissioner Townsend has a question.
Just a question, in our brochure, this is shown as transfer from the land bank? Are we transferring it from or to the land bank?
No, these would be from the land bank to the two recipients, Mr. Barrera and ABC, after the quiet title has been completed.
Your title is incorrect on this one.
Yeah, so you're talking about 4714 Vista.
Yeah, should be from the land bank. There you go.
I apologize.
Okay, just for clarity.
Okay, now I see the confusion. Yes, these are both going back out. So we're pre-authorizing to go back to ABC after the title work is completed.
And again, that was the request. My apologies.
So there is a motion and a second to approve both of these transfers as submitted. Any further discussion? Any comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Next, we have 7 applications tonight. 1 is a yard extension, 6 are property acquisition. All applicants are current on their taxes and have no code violations. And as we talked at the last standing committee about the potential hold area for the Northeast and the master plan, I do want to point out that all 7 of these applications are in that area. So I just thought I'd let you know that. The first is 1128 North 32nd Street, and the applicant is here at 1119 North 34th. We have 3034, 3040, 3042, 3044 Hiawatha Street, which are basically these properties here from Ms. Ford. She is asking that these properties be purchased more as an investment, and she indicated she has plans to possibly plant an orchard. And then 1137, 1139 Everett. This is currently where the Strugglers Hill Roots Neighborhood Group has their community garden, and they've just reached out recently saying that they'd like to take ownership of the properties. So the request is those are the requests before you.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Is Ms. Ford here? Is Ms. Ford present? This request from her for 4 properties, does she own any others?
No, her residence is out on 85th and Ann.
Okay, so these 4 are the only ones she's
There's
come
2
forward.
others, but we have not received those applications. She gave us 2 other applications. They had the wrong address on them after we talked with her, and I don't believe she submitted those other 2 applications yet, or at least by the time the deadline was.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Burrows.
Clarification, in my notes, it says these properties are in the area of the Northeast Master Plan.
Correct, but yet there is no hold on those land. As we talked about last month, the request, and then I was asked to bring that back on the 29th. So that discussion will still take place on the 29th.
Okay.
Then is it premature to, I mean, if there's a discussion that's not resolved about the topic that was brought up at the last meeting, which I was not here for that meeting, but if it was discussed and that action on that discussion was postponed until the 29th, would it make sense to postpone these until that is resolved, since it came first?
I mean, that's the decision you have to make. That was one of the questions I had last month, or at the last meeting, was if we wanted to go ahead and still bring applications forward, and I was told to go ahead. So that's why they're before you tonight. But I do believe, I think you talked about, you guys would still have the option of approving, denying, or holding them over until we had the meeting on the 29th.
Commissioner Townsend.
My understanding of that was with regard to some that might come after. I really wasn't thinking about this meeting. In fairness, I would go ahead and move to approve these.
Okay.
Because that was not the understanding I had with regard to that, since we did delay further discussion of that or contemplation of that. So in fairness, anybody who had come forward, I could see we would go ahead and move on their application. And if it was going to be denied, not denied on that basis.
So is that then a motion to approve these
I would move
applications as submitted?
I would move to approve as submitted.
Commissioner Walters?
Well, I was going to try to recall what I thought we agreed to last time. We had a recommendation that we put all these properties on hold until the Northeast Master Plan was completed. And somebody suggested, well, we really don't need to put them on hold because we have the authority to approve or not approve, and we can just not approve them even though we don't officially put them on hold if we think that it would conflict with the successful development or approval or ultimate execution of the Northeast Master Plan. So I have to say, when I see 4 properties on this list being requested by somebody who doesn't even live in the area, and they're applying for it as an investment, I think that that's what we were trying to avoid, was that exact circumstance. So I think we should be very cautious about approving any properties that are within that district.
Until we make that decision.
Until we know what the master plan evolves into or develops into.
Is there some public comment that we're missing?
I don't know, Commissioner Townsend?
Well, I could see Commissioner Walters' point. I was thinking about the next meeting that we would have at this committee, and the person would be no better off since these are in there. Commissioner Walters, are you just talking about these 4 properties on Hiawatha or any others as well?
Those were the ones that came to my attention, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my inclination would be that all 7 of these would be held until the resolution of that discussion. If the discussion would influence policy on what we routinely do with these applications, because I don't see the applicant here for these properties, because it doesn't appear that there's any urgency. There's no project that's going to, I mean, there's no urgency to this resolution of this. I really wouldn't see a problem holding these over until that larger discussion has been resolved.
It's 28 days.
Right.
We meet again in 28 days.
Yeah, we'll be here on the 29th of this month.
Meet twice this month.
Yeah.
For the reasons you stated, I could withdraw that motion and withdraw that motion, and we can
So
consider.
the motion to approve has been withdrawn. Is there an alternate motion?
Move for, let me see if I can phrase this right. So let's just put all this on hold until the 29th. So it's not objecting to that.
So we have a motion and a second then to delay action on these 7 properties until the resolution of that other matter.
Okay.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comment? Roll call, please.
Roll call Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Next, we have one donation to the land bank. It's 2036 North Halleck Street. And it's this property here on the north end. It's outlined in black. The requester has just indicated that she's just unable to maintain the property. She doesn't have the finance in keeping the upkeep of the property, and that's why she'd like to have it, is requesting to donate it to the land bank.
What's the tax status?
Taxes are current.
And I think this is, and I appreciate that, and I think this is one of the advantages to this donation program becoming more well-known in the community, is that when somebody is up against a property like this that they find themselves unable to take care of, that they know there's an avenue for them rather than simply neglecting it and letting it go. So, Commissioner Townsend.
Yes, I want to put on the record also that the donator indicates a hardship. She does say that she's unable to maintain, and she recently lost her husband, so I'd just like to put that into the record and move to approve the application.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve this donation as submitted. Any further discussion? Any comment? Roll call, please.
Roll call Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Okay, and it's just time for our monthly update with the rehab program. And for those that memorized it last month, it's just only has 2 changes. So we've basically had 2 more rehabs started out of 2 houses that had previously not had an offer. So that's really the only changes. I know we have a couple final inspections already scheduled this week, so we should see some changes by the time we meet on the 29th. Today was the deadline for the second tier of the rehab program for them to submit an application to get a chance. We'll have, I believe, just about 30 houses that will have open houses next week. We'll have scheduled. We'll send that information out later this week, and then we'll see what kind of offers we get from the new applicants. So, looking forward to seeing if we get some good progress out of that and get that no offer number down. So, that's all I have tonight.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That is the last item on the agenda for this committee. So we are adjourned. We'll give BPU Board Member Bryant a moment to come up and join us at the table, and then we'll convene our next meeting.
Gives me my little bag to work out of.
BPU Representative Jeff Bryant to the committee, and our Administrator Doug Bach. Welcome to the committee this evening. I will now call the Economic Development and Finance Council Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item of the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into the microphone so we may get you properly recorded. Roll call, please.
Roll call Bryant.
Here.
Walters,
Here.
Murguia,
Here.
Townsend,
Here.
McKiernan,
Here.
Burrows.
Here. Next, we have minutes from our August 20th meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comment, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Seeing none, minutes have been approved. We have two items, well, just one item on the agenda this evening, and that is the presentation of the Metropolitan Avenue Redevelopment Project Plan by Mr. John Stevens of our Economic Development. Mr. Stevens, welcome to the committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners, committee members, Mr. Bach, John Stevens, Director of Economic Development. I've been asked to come before you this evening to give you an update on the Metropolitan Avenue Argentine fast food project. So that is what we're here for tonight. There is a rendering of the project as outlined previously. To give you an idea of the proposed site, this is 18th Street Expressway. You see the Save-A-Lot, the Walmart project, and the areas along here. The site plan, as envisioned along South 21st Street and Metropolitan Avenue and 18th Street Expressway, is a 4,000 square foot Wendy's Pizza Hut, dual flag, single built project building. Some of the factors to consider, as I previously mentioned, it's located adjacent to the Walmart and the Save-A-Lot and Dollar General projects along the corridor. You can see, as was previously brought before the committee for consideration, is the project area 3 of the TIF district, incorporating of the Metropolitan Avenue TIF redevelopment area. So just to quickly recap, for those of you who are not familiar, the $1.6 million was issued in GO bonds in 2013 for Save-A-Lot, property tax TIF there, sales tax agreement there, as well as 3.7 in GO bonds for the Walmart, 1 million UG for public infrastructure, 2.7 for the Walmart, and then there are other outlots within existing project area 2. So the project before you tonight, as outlined from the developer's pro forma, is a $1.955 million total project, including contingency. That includes $32,000 for the site acquisition fees, $1.4 approximately million for construction costs, including prep, building, and contingency, as well as about $500,000 of soft costs, which total about 26% of the total project costs. So to give you an idea, I think it's important that we look at the TIF, the property tax and sales tax home rule related to the Walmart and Save-A-Lot, so you can see those, and then how those waterfall down to the South Patrol station that was constructed within this project area, which is approximately $3.2 million project. That has a $1.85 million debt service with $947,000 in interest on that debt service that is primarily paid off through excess revenue of the TIF collections from the existing TIF district. So this project, the requested incentives, as the developer has outlined, includes the following. It's a 1% sales tax CID, which is an add-on CID, that the pro forma suggests about $448,000 in gross revenue over the 22-year collection term of a 1% sales tax CID that would be collected just within this Wendy's Pizza Hut facility. It includes a TIF district within Project Area 3 that's a pay-go, so there'd be no bond issuance or geo-backing, and the pro forma suggests $541,000 approximately of gross revenue over the 20-year term of that. Then there would be a local sales tax revenue diversion back to the project. So that's a dedication of the local sales tax revenue back into the project for a 20-year term. Pro forma suggests $779,000 approximately of gross revenue collected back into the project over the 20-year term. There's a federal grant that ANDA was awarded, and the pro forma suggests that $600,000 would be contributed to this. All of the proceeds of the $600,000 would be contributed to this project on the front end. And then there's an economic development cash contribution, which is a $400,000 upfront contribution from the unified government that's currently not budgeted, but it's the request within this pro forma that would be provided upfront to fund and pro forma this project. So that proposal, the proposal does include possible payback of the corpus pending project performance, which you'll see in a minute. So this is really hard to read, sorry. Tried to expand this as much as I could. But this is a summation of the requested incentives that I highlighted here, so we can discuss those if any of the committee members have questions. But this is the summation of the performance of that. What this states is just how each of that breaks down and what the projected collections are over the 20 and 22-year terms of each component of this financing vehicle. So as I said, the project details a 4,000 square foot Wendy's Pizza Hut facility. The federal grant and UG contribution would be used as upfront closing costs totaling $1 million. And then the developer would privately place a $967,000 private loan that would be paid back by a triple net lease, and the developer incentives would be used to service the loan for what they project as a 15-year term. And then the public sales tax, the TIF, the CID, and all of the other components would be used to fund full performance of that loan retirement. So the next steps would be for the UG to identify a source of the $400,000 grant. That could be amended 2019 general fund budget, added to the 2019 debt issuance, or possibly some other format of financing of that $400,000 for addition into this project. The Planning Commission would need to approve the full TIF conformance with the comprehensive plan. There would need to be a public hearing process to approve the final establishment of Project Area 3 of this TIF plan, as well as the establishment of the 1% CID. And there would need to be an adoption of an adoption of resolution approving the development agreement, the final development agreement that would have all the terms in that, and that is currently in process but is not finalized yet. With that, that is the staff presentation related to the framework of this project.
Any questions from the commission in reference to the presentation?
I have a question.
Commissioner Walters?
So have we ever directed sales tax back to a project before?
On a rebate type basis?
Well,
we've done it within a TIF structure, and that was one of the changes that the developer made to this request a couple of weeks ago. So we had to look back to this and look at it from a legality perspective and understand that we could. We've done it on a small scale where we had some rebate, for like a year or something like that, or two. I think we did one with the Happy Food store up on Leavenworth Road 15 years ago, that we did something like that. But to do a long-standing agreement over the time period, we'd sought a legal agreement to do it. And I think the big point to that is the developer is the one that becomes at risk on that if there's something that said we couldn't do it. Otherwise, it really operates the same way as a TIF, other than the fact that we have to administer it ourselves, which was also a little bit of concern of mine, because when you collect the sales tax, let's say a Wendy's or a Pizza Hut, they'll pay their sales tax to the state of Kansas for all their Wendy's or all their areas. So you want to make sure they're distinguishing out how much this store collects and that they pay in sales tax, because then when the state distributes, they'll distribute all the money in one bucket, and we have to divide that out. So it does take a little bit of administrative work over and above what a TIF would be when you divide that out. So it's a different tool. The end result is similar to what you do with the TIF, but it takes more work on our end.
Thank you.
Any other commission members have a question?
So I'd like to make some clarity. As you all know, I'm the Unified Government 3rd District Commissioner. All of you know that I'm also the Executive Director of the Argentine Neighborhood Development Association. If you haven't heard, I've resigned from that position. It's effective December 1st. I am not here to advocate on behalf of this project, because according to our ethics administrator, even though I, as the ONDA executive director, do not receive any financial benefit from this project, I have to recuse myself, and that is regardless of whether I've resigned or not, which is kind of strange to me. But with all of that said, I have some questions. I sat on this side because to honor the ethics ruling, I will not be voting on this. I understand it's on the agenda for information purposes only, and since it's just on the agenda for information purposes only, I guess I have some questions. And since I have both parties here as the commissioner, with the developer, Micah King, who is the actual developer with Argentine Betterment Corporation. He's being assisted with that development with Jeff Sharp, who is from Ferguson Developers, and our lawyers from Postinelli, Kevin Lee, can answer all of those questions. But I have some more government-related questions and how we make these decisions. It seems to be different for every deal that comes in front of us. So I would ask the county administrator, how long has this deal been in front of the unified government for consideration?
Jeff, a couple of years?
Hi, Jeff Sharp, Ferguson Properties. Yeah, probably 2+ years.
And what has, it's a Wendy's and a Pizza Hut, and it's taken 2.5 years, yet I can think of a number of projects that are much larger that took a lot less time than 2.5 years. So I would like to be clear on what the holdup is with this particular very small urban project that has a significant amount of federal government grant money in it. So what has been the holdup with coming to a development agreement and bringing a signed development agreement to this committee to vote on?
Okay, well, there's probably many different issues that factor into it. You know, as you're aware, the original agreement started it was proposed to be a Dunkin' Donuts, pizza, Wendy's. So the scope of the project has changed. I think the original commitment for the federal grant was $1.2 million, and that figure changed, I don't know, consistently as we went through, so we had to kind of rework the financials as it would go along, as that was, though. It was unique in the sense that there's really no private equity in this. Now, it's the developer gets to count the federal grant to it, but when you're dealing with an entity that's doesn't have any equity within it, so you look at it and you're trying to evaluate where you're at, that there's no, who's the private party responsible back to it. So those are always complex things to work through. I know it's come before the commission. I would say probably one of the biggest delays on this was the request for GAP or grant funding from the unified government. So we brought that issue before the commission. We had some discussion about going back and getting a policy done. Ultimately, we've never done a policy regarding anything like that. So as John noted in that, we don't have any money identified for that $400,000, but knowing that's how that is, it's to bring that before you all and determine if you want to put additional money that's not generated by the project within it. So it's a confusing issue. So while it's a small project and one that's smaller than it was when it originally started, those are some things that really delayed it. And I would say the gap being a very controversial issue, or the grant funding back from the unified government, was one that probably delayed this as much as anything.
So you'd say that probably the primary reason for the delay in moving this project forward and allowing the commission to vote on it is all of the discussions around the gap funding. And the gap funding requested is, John, can you tell me that number again?
$400,000.
Yeah, so the big sticking point with administration was a $400,000 gap funding that needed to be filled to make the deal happen. Wouldn't you say?
Well, it was 500,000 something, but it also changed because we were working off a larger scale project, and then it went the 1.2 million, as you saw now, we're at $600,000 that's in federal funding. That used to be 1.2. So, you know, keeping up when you have changes to the structure of how a deal's coming together, you know, you have to react to that, work back through it, and figure out what would be the actual deal that we're bringing forward to the governing body.
And just so you're aware, there was a larger scale project, but because of the delay in coming to an agreement with the unified government on the gap funding policy, one of those retailers pulled out because 2.5 years is a long time to wait. I don't know any business person that is going to hang around for 2.5 years over a $400,000 policy for supposable gap funding. I guess what I'm really confused about is here we are tonight again for our 5th informational session on a very small project in one of our most impoverished areas in our county. And it was all because we didn't have a policy around gap funding. And yet we just approved an almost $7 million grant to build a grocery store downtown. Do we have a policy around giving out $700 million grants for grocery stores?
I think most development deals kind of come on their own. We work through what different sources want to be funded, and that's, again, like one of the questions we have this evening, and that was one of those that came, that we had some feedback from the commission and where we went forward with the grocery store.
Do we have a grant policy around giving grant money out? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people here tonight that would be interested in bringing offers and development deals to the table if the unified government has access to millions of dollars in grant money.
No, we don't.
Policy around $7 million in grant money.
No, we do not.
And we went ahead with that project.
Right, after about 4 years, that project is now advanced.
That's right, and we all approve that. And I don't recall, I've reviewed all the tapes, and I don't recall one commissioner asking one question about a policy around grant money, a grant funding policy. I don't remember one commissioner. Yet, when the ask for the 3rd district came up for a $400,000 gap funding or a grant, there were all kinds of questions about policy. And I remember one incident in particular where we can't just be giving that kind of money out without a government policy in place. Yet we're not only spending almost $7 million on a grocery store, but we're going to own it in addition to that, correct?
Yeah, I think the project in the grocery store is about $5.7 million. There's some, different TIF programs that we're owning the building.
There's been some discussion also about, in the past, when District 3 has brought projects forward with no tenants, we have a policy that we don't fund, speculative deals, yet my understanding is that there is, presented by Mr. Stevens, that you're going to add on 2 speculative retail spots to this grocery, and that's what increased the cost of it, based on not even a letter of intent, just some sidebar conversations that people might be interested in renting some additional space.
I think his comment was more in line that if within we wouldn't add to it, if we could build it within, then we would look to do that if we had tenants that could come and play as we progress through the project. I think the gap funding policy came about probably more inclined with this project because as I went through the budget process, had introduced the concept of can we do something to do some gap funding for projects. And then this project came after that to ask for some of that gap funding. So the commission asked me back to it. It's like, well, there's no gap funding policy in place, so we introduced this concept. So that's where we kicked that around back and forth a fair amount and then looked at funding and then not. And ultimately, I think the decision was every project just needs to stand on its own, and then we determine whether or not we're funding it up. And I would offer if anybody's different, but that came before this committee probably the number of times that was part of this project because it was associated with this project as it came around, but that's my recollection as to how that worked.
So your feeling was, the impression you got from the commission is that gap funding was probably not a good idea because every project needs to stand on its own.
Every project has its own evaluation points, and also, I think it's difficult for the governing body to budget $500,000 or $1 million for an unknown. We've got a lot of things that have requirements and needs within our community, you know, a lot of infrastructure improvements, so without having a specific project to tie it to, it was hard to tie up money.
But we had $7 million for a grocery store.
Okay, well, you're twisting that, but that's,
How am I twisting that? Untwisted.
I'm saying is the gap issue around a budget was to go and build a budget and say, we're just gonna put $1 million in a fund and then hold it until something came about. And I think that was generally the discussion to say, let's not do that. But when we have projects come, then we determine how we would help fill the gap, whether that be look to the future budget and put it in, or do some type of bond financing.
Okay.
And that was the decision on the grocery store.
But we figured that one out.
Yep.
Was there any, did any commissioner, did any organization, not-for-profit, did anybody apply or receive any grant funds for that project whatsoever?
That project.
The grocery store project?
Oh, John, I think we have some list money coming to it, but
Yeah, after the, as part of the financial pro formas, $5.8 million total. LISC, we're currently going through the application process, would lower the front-end debt service and the full-term debt service on that total.
Is that a grant or a loan?
It's a hybrid. It would be a zero-interest loan and then possibly a partial interest loan, a lower than market rate loan.
So my question was, is there any grant money in the $7 million grocery store that anyone has applied for or received?
There was and is some limited pre-development funding grants through LISC.
And those were pre-development grants for the, so it's more than $7 million if you include the pre-development costs. How much were the pre-development costs?
The total project cost is $5.8 million.
The entire project, the pre-development costs, including the construction of the building with the 2 additional spaces, is $5.8 million. Because in meetings that I've been briefed on, I've heard 6.2, and I've heard almost as much as 7 million. So just so we're clear, it's still 5.8 million.
yeah, I don't think I've heard anybody say that number.
Okay, so there's 5.8 million, and there's no grant dollars in this project whatsoever. It's 100% funded by taxpayers.
Well, outside of the grant money you just identified.
Outside of small.
But it's small numbers.
Outside of pre-development grant money, I'm talking about the construction and the, because if you want to count that from the review of this deal, there's been a lot of time over the last 2.5 years where there's been a lot of grant money invested in pre-development and a lot of legal fees and a lot of developer fees established that were donated, that were contributed to the project. So I think you have it down that, I'm not really sure, since this is not my project, this is an ABC project. Onda is contributing the money because we raised it, but we're giving that money to ABC as a gift, and that amount of money is how much?
Per the pro forma, $600,000 in federal grant dollars.
Okay, so we're donating $600,000 to this project, and that doesn't account for the pre-development, in-kind pre-development, nor the in-kind legal fees, correct? So let's just say in 2.5 years, no offense, Kevin, but I know how much a lawyer at Postinelli costs an hour. And I also know how much developers cost, Mr. Ferguson, so they're not cheap. So I'll be conservative and say we'll add another couple $100,000 for the 2.5 years they've spent working on this project for free, because they're not being paid. So that takes it up to an $800,000 investment in this project. Yet, with an $800,000 grant in, again, one of the lowest income neighborhoods in our city, on land that was drawing no property tax, the land in which John has described to you where the location would be, was donated to the city from Governor Brownback directly. I know that because I went and asked him to donate the land. It's highway easement, in which currently right now, ABC, Micah King, is the executive director of, mows for the unified government and pays a substantial amount to a minority contractor, the Jones Family Mowing Company, a substantial amount of money. They live here, they vote here, they live in Wyandotte County, and they mow that property every year and have for the last 5 years. So that would be, in my opinion, another in-kind donation to the government. I don't have that total. Micah may be able to tell you roughly about annual mowing expenses to keep 18th Street Expressway mowed, which the unified government does not mow and hasn't for 5 years, which is their responsibility to mow. So if you add that in, I just know how much, we'll just say $50,000, even though I know that in 5 years of mowing, that's significantly more. So now we're up to $850,000 of investment, not only to mention the savings that we created for our government. And yet the project still has been in the queue for 2.5 years and continues to be put on the agenda for informational purposes only. I'm baffled by that. I've also heard some concerns that some of our commissioners may have about they want this project to be prevailing wage. Yet when we talked about the new fire station and when we talked about the new grocery store, not one person asked one question about those projects being prevailing wage, not one. And by the way, it's against the law because the state of Kansas no longer allows local governments to enforce prevailing wage. So just wanted to get ahead of that discussion before it went on. So if there are concerns about me, I'm done on December 1. I will no longer work for ONDA in any capacity. I'm winding things down for them now as it is. This is an ABC project. I'm disappointed that for the 5th time this is on for informational purposes. And prior to this meeting, I had a discussion with Administrator Bach. There were, according to his version and according to my team's version, there were 3 outstanding issues. 2 of those outstanding issues have verbally been agreed upon. One of them they agree on, is just they need to better understand that issue. I'm confused with how we've had 2.5 years to resolve these issues and we still can't get them in writing. So I will say publicly what I said to Mr. Bach. I get a feeling our staff doesn't like this project and therefore doesn't want to bring it forward. I can speculate that there might be some commissioners that are bending their ear about this project. I don't know that don't like this project or want it to happen for whatever reason. What I'm here to talk about is fairness and decency along with people's roles in this government. I believe Administrator Bach is to collect deals, package them, and bring them to the commission to make the decision on whether or not they're a good deal. I don't think it is our administrator's job to decide what is a good deal before he signs a development agreement. I believe that's the commission's job. And if that's not the commission's job to make the decision on the final deal, then I don't know why we're all here tonight or why we're ever here. So this is an easy deal. It's going to create a substantial number of jobs. For those of you that don't know about the grant that was written, I wrote the grant. And to be clear, again, this isn't advocacy. This is information. Since this is an informational session, the federal government has very strict guidelines on these grants. This grant is not a health grant, though it was filtered through Health and Human Services. This grant is a jobs creation grant for some of the lowest income people in our county. That's what the grant is for. It's to create jobs. There is a requirement within the grant for those of you that would have taken the time to read it, staff and commissioners alike. You would have seen that annually the federal government sends an auditing team to Kansas, to Argentine, to review that that criteria is met. And I know that because we used the same grant funding on the Save-A-Lot grocery store, where we were audited annually. Now, there has been some accusation that that money was spent inappropriately. I have had the auditors, the federal auditors, come and review that and provide our administrator with the statement that not only was that money previously used appropriately, the accusations that were made by someone here in Wyandotte County were completely unfounded, that that money was used misappropriately. And not only that, but that they consider the work, the grant fundraising that ONDA has done to provide to ABC to do these projects in one of the poorest areas has been the poster child across the country in the way of urban and economic development. Now, anybody that wants to see that in writing, you're welcome to get that from Administrator Bach. You're welcome to get that from me, from our attorneys. You're welcome to call Washington, D.C. You're welcome to call Congressman Yoder, and you're welcome to call Health and Human Services. I will gladly provide anybody that feels that for some reason I'm not telling the truth. Okay? So tonight, we presented this deal. I'm annoyed that it's for informational purposes. I think you know enough about the project. Mr. Bach has an issue with one item, is that accurate? One item in the agreement. And it is my understanding that that agreement sat on the desk of Todd LaSala for 2 weeks with no work being done on it. And now tonight, again, for the 5th time, we sit here in front of you without an agreement, and it's couched as informational only. And I've been told it's our policy not to bring anything forward that doesn't have a development agreement behind it. We can't bring a development agreement forward for the commission to vote on. The county administrator won't sign a development agreement. And I'll say again, in my opinion, whether he likes it, the deal or not, it's really not up to him. He can bring the deal forward and say he doesn't like the deal, and then it's up to all of you. But this is not a dictatorship, and one person doesn't get to decide what deals come forward and what deals don't come forward. So, I don't want to burn any more volunteer time of high-dollar Post-Nelly attorneys or high-dollar developers, nor do I want to burn the time of all of the great community people that came here tonight to support this project, who have worked hard and volunteered. Because as I look out there and I see them, none of them, with the exception of one, receives any form of payment. None of them. And I would just like to read, I truly believe, I'll leave it at this then. I believe as elected officials, we're elected to do what the people want us to do. We work for them. They don't work for us. We work for them. And I don't know if it's a dog and pony show or what it is, but we put out a survey every 2 years, and we ask questions of our constituents about roads, curbs, sidewalk, what their priorities are. I never once saw a question about a new fire station or a grocery store in the Northeast on our survey. But I, given my free 5 questions, put out there, is this something that not only District 3 wants to see happen, is this something that our entire county wants to see happen? And these are the answers to the questions in case for some reason you all skipped over that. So what I did is I won't bore you with the details. Alls I looked at is the percentage of people that either agree with this project in our county or strongly agree. Okay? I left neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree out, okay? So these are people that agree or strongly agree. In District 1, 72.9% people are in favor of this project happening. In District 2, 72.7% of all people are in agreement or strongly agree with this project. In District 3, not surprising, 100% of the people are in agreement of this project. I've never seen 100% of people surveyed agree on anything. In District 4, shockingly, which is not even in that district, 100% of the people agree that this is a good project. In District 5, which is in Piper, only 33.3% of the people agree with this project. So for some reason, people in Piper don't want things to happen in Argentine in the way of fast food. In District 6, another 100% of the people interviewed in our survey agree with this project. In District 7, 84.6% of the people agree with this project, for a total of countywide 74.7% of the people in this county want to see this project happen in Argentine. When the next question that was asked is, do you believe, I just heard the mayor say that we need to make sure that we first meet the needs of our existing residents, the existing demographic of the people that live here. One of the things that we need to do is meet the needs of the job market. And we all know, we're not blind to this, that we have a large dropout rate, and many of our residents lack the skill set to get high-paying, more advanced jobs. However, I went ahead and asked the question in my 5 free questions that I'm allowed on the survey is, do you think these restaurants would provide much-needed jobs for residents in this area? District 1 again, sorry I have to do the adding on this, I didn't get this far. I believe it totals 82.2% of the people said, yeah, they'd be interested in a job. In District 2, I think that's Brian McKiernan's district, 87.9% of the people said they'd like to have a job at one of these restaurants and would be interested in that. In District 3, which is my district, where the development is occurring, it's 100%. In District 4, again, which is Commissioner Johnson's district, 100% of the people said they'd be interested. Again, District 5 and Piper, they're really not interested in seeing business in District 3 or working in District 3. And that's okay, they have the legends. In District 6, 100% of the people are interested in a job in this area and think it could be beneficial. In District 7, this math gets a little harder. It's almost 90%, might be over 90% of the people would be interested in a job. So for $400,000 and 2 fast food restaurants where there are absolutely 0 in a neighborhood that is bordered by highways that do not allow people that do not have cars to get to affordable places to eat, I think it is a very minuscule request. So before we finish up, I don't want to come back here again with a bunch of excuses. So does anybody have any questions about any of the information that's been presented?
Any questions, commission members? Mr. Bryant?
About how many jobs would it supply, roughly, or estimated?
Evan, do you know?
Kevin Lee with Polsinelli Law Firm. I don't have that answer offhand. I don't know if Jeff is.
Go, Jeff.
I think it was around 18 to 20 jobs, maybe 20, 25, depending on.
I remembered 22. We're giving you rough numbers, but clearly in excess of 18. Any more questions?
Any other questions?
One more. Was there any chance of him doing any, future development on the balance of that ground? Because I noticed that it was, I know the piece of ground that you're talking about, and it goes beyond, as you get closer to the road that goes under the bridge. Was that second section also?
I mean, we would definitely like to leave the possibility open if a user comes along to be able to take advantage of the balance of the site. As currently contemplated under the development agreement, it just addresses this 4,000 square foot retailer, and so it would not, we would be back before you
Okay.
amend the deal.
And was access from 21st or was it from Metropolitan into the property?
Well, that's to be determined with staff. We're going to get down the road.
Sorry, I mean, I haven't been in any of the I'm newer to
Well,
these committees.
we haven't gone to staff to talk about access issues at this point yet. And to be honest, we presented all sites in this area in front of Walmart, everywhere to retailers, and to enable to get their interest. This was the number one site. I mean, even the site right across the street next to Save-A-Lot was too far away from the interstate or the highway to get their interest and secure a tenant for this location.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner, I'd just like to, I, like Mr. Bryant, have not been privy to a lot of this information, so I appreciate you bringing forward your concerns. And I want you to know, from me personally, I respect your service and advocacy for your district. Your leadership has definitely assisted in the transformation of your district. This project adds to an area that was deemed unsuitable for decades for development. And here we are this evening talking about a project that will add to and continue to enhance the area. As I stated, I can't speak to what's happened before. This meeting was important that we had tonight to educate some of us. I'm assuming that when we have an opportunity to bring jobs and development to the community, many of us are very supportive of that. But I want to commend you for reaching out, getting a grant to continue to invest in those issues that are important to our community. I know I personally appreciate it as a resident of the community and as commissioner at large.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the public? Would anyone like to address this issue? Yes, please state your name and into the microphone, please, and address.
Dwayne Beth, and my address is 2937 North 64th Street, but I've been sent here as an advocate for Mickey Surplus, who is a longtime friend of mine, the owner, Mark Turley, who's the sole owner and proprietor of Mickey Surplus, which is a business on the corner of Strong Avenue, which supersedes the Legends and any other business, and in fact, probably the oldest, if not the oldest business in the Argentine area. And a friend of mine, since I worked at police district a good part of my career, 30 years, he implores you guys to push this through, and it's not really pushed through because this has been on the agenda for 2 years. I've been hearing about this, and it builds up to where these people down there are excited about getting this, and then they say, well, what happened? Why are we getting this? There's no place to eat down there. I just talked to him today, and he said if he wants to go to lunch, he has to get in his car, take 30, 45 minutes away from his business that he owns just to go get a hamburger somewhere. And he doesn't believe just that it will bring jobs to these, to Pizza Hut and Wendy's. He's really upset he's not getting a donut shop now because of the delay.
Me too.
It's the delay. And he, as a business owner, is hanging by a string down there. A lot of the businesses are gone. There's storefronts that are vacant that need to be filled, and there's no reason that we can't try and put a magnet down there to attract other businesses and to give other people a place to go just to get something to eat. There's people, besides the vacant places, there's people that work down there and live down there. And you know, I've read comments before about, you know, people want health food and fast food's not good for them. You think them people aren't going to go get pizza somewhere else? They just have to drive farther and burn more gas, and the ones that can't have to send somebody else. So, you know, it's a moot point. The fast food argument is a moot point. The people down there need this place just for the jobs, for some place to go to eat, to attract more people to come to the Argentine area, because it is a nice area. It's a growing area. It's probably one of the most underrated places in the city for development, and because it's a small community, and it only gives them more exposure to get people to go to the Argentine area, which will attract more businesses, which attracts more money. And if you attract business people that want to build down there, so you don't have to give them incentives anymore, that's what we want, or at least that's what I want. I don't know why it's just an information thing that should have been voted on the first time it came up. It's not someone's decision, an elected official's decision to build businesses. I represent a guy that's a business owner that's had that business since 1962. That's a long time to run a business down there. And he's one of the biggest businesses in Argentine. And we want private businesses. We want people to come and want to build here. And if it's not on the agenda, not only is he going to be upset, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Thank you, Mr. Beth.
I got to say.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the audience who would care to speak?
Good evening. My name is Henry Sandate. I am chairman of the board of Argentine Neighborhood Development Association. I've been on the board since its inception, I think about 12 years ago. And what I'd just like to emphasize, there's been a lot said here for every reason why we should have this business built and operating. And employment is a main feature, and I understand that, and that's the purpose of this grant. But one of the things that occurred that I was privileged to was to sit on an audit with the administrator from Health and Human Services. And at that audit, there's various representation present, the attorneys, administrators from the city, board members, community members, community folks that volunteer their time and have an interest in Argentine. But in the conversation that was very obvious, that stood out amongst everything else, was when the official from Health and Human Services asked about the success of employment at the Save-A-Lot grocery store. And the manager of the Save-A-Lot grocery store, and I believe it might have been a regional manager, explained that they've had major success there, not just financially, but also from a standpoint of training employees who live in Argentine, and had also been promoted after they were trained, gone through the system, put into management, and then transferred out to other stores in the vicinity here, I think particularly in Wyandotte County, to manage other stores. And they were also in a position financially that I think believed to also buy real estate, buy a house to live in. So the Save-A-Lot grocery store itself serves as an example of what I believe this fast food operation would be, what the Pizza Hut, Wendy's would serve. And that is not just a means of just making a part-time wage, but I think also a means of developing skilled workers, eventually skilled workers, management-style workers that could go out and make progress and evolve and succeed in life. And that's one thing that's kind of tough in Argentina. It's an area where you don't see a lot of opportunity to serve. And now we have a Walmart, we have a Save-A-Lot, we have the Dollar General. And we have, hopefully, this fast food operation where kids can, after school, walk down the street and have an opportunity to develop some skills, some people skills, some business skills, and eventually some managerial skills, and stay in Wyandotte County and make those contributions, get traction, and then they turn into taxpayers, and then we see it all cycle back around and we see a thriving community. So that's the emphasis I wanted to make as a business owner, the significance of having an investment like a fast food operation at 18th and Metropolitan. Thank you for your time.
I did see another person.
Hi, first I'd like to thank the esteemed UG Standing Committee for recognizing me and hearing my comments. My name is Dustin Dye. I live at 1618 South 29th Street in the Argentine neighborhood. I've recently earned an MPA in Urban Policy and Administration from UMKC, where I also work. Just across the street from you, Dr. McKiernan. We're only separated by a go chicken go. And I think we both appreciate data when reaching a conclusion. So here are some figures I'd like the UG to consider. According to citydata.com, the poverty rate in Argentine is 29%, which is 42% higher than the city average of 20%. And 40% of Argentine residents have less than a high school diploma. Most of the challenges in Argentine are either directly or indirectly caused by lack of employment opportunities. The UG needs to raise the effective demand for labor if they want to decrease unemployment. In a survey commissioned by the UG and administered by the ETC Institute, the results from which I'm sure you've received and Commissioner McGee has shared tonight, 75% of respondents answered they agreed they would like to see fast food restaurants built in Argentine. 81% agreed these restaurants would provide jobs. 79% agreed they would eat at the restaurants, and 60% agreed they would support investing tax dollars in these restaurants. As ETC's Institute survey was a random sample with an alpha of 0.05, I have no reason to question the validity of their results. These sentiments are more likely representative of the residents' wishes than a ballot initiative would be, as a truly random sample would capture a better cross-section of the city than those who tend to turn up at local elections. I understand the criticisms of this proposal that fast food is unhealthy and the jobs they create will be low-paying. Both these may be true, but currently there are few dining options in Argentine. Us residents would like options within walking distance. I would argue living in an area that has suffered from decades of disinvestment is worse for your health than fast food. Now, if we were having this conversation before Argentine had a full-service grocery store, I would object to bringing fast food to such an area, but now that we have healthy options, I don't see the harm in adding a couple fast food joints. Argentine needs investment to attract more opportunities. The Health and Human Services Office of Community Development will also provide a grant to fund these jobs to supplement the income of people on Social Security. As someone with a master's degree, I find it paternalistic to tell a disabled person they shouldn't do such a job because it's not good enough. Commissioner Walters, in your experience working for one of the most prestigious architecture firms in the world, do you have clients who prefer to build in locations with amenities as opposed to areas without amenities? Do employers want options for their employees and look at what is in the area before they decide to build there? These restaurants would create as many jobs as the downtown grocery store, but would do so for $400,000 compared to $6 million. And unlike tax cuts for corporations that come with no strings attached, we can give an incentive for this project because we know how the money will be invested. I won't pretend that building a couple of restaurants will be a panacea for Argentine's challenges, but it is one step towards spurring more economic development in the neighborhood. When businesses see others investing in Argentine, they'll be more likely to invest as well. The residents of Argentine would like to see the neighborhood become a place where people stop rather than a place where people turn around. So I ask the UG Commission, please invest in Argentine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Richard Ripper. I live at 1875 South Powell in Kansas City, Kansas. Now, I have a business and accounting firm, so I know all the ins and outs of accounting and the finances, and I'm more of a numbers type of person. Now, I also am a board member of ONDA, just want to bring that up. Now, since this is only an information thing, I guess it's trying to get the information out to all the commissioners about this project. So I have a couple of questions. The Walmart is a TIF, correct?
Yeah, this is just a comment session at this time. This is
Okay.
just.
Well, it's my understanding that Walmart is a TIF, and that the TIF was supposed to repay a bond. And from my understanding, the TIF is still going on, and the bond is fully paid. You need to find out where the rest of that money is going. Why can't that money be used to help allocate this $400,000? That's already coming out of that district. Okay? The next thing is, Kansas City, they said that it's hard for them to track the sales tax. Now, I'm an accountant. I happen to know that when they open up those two establishments will get their own sales tax number. You'll get a report by that number of that money coming in. What's so hard of tracking that money? Those are the only two things I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Teresa Gardner, 5141 Stearns, Shawnee, Kansas. I was a lifelong Wyandotte resident until a couple of years ago. I have been involved with this project since the grant was first sought out. The grant was awarded about 4 years ago, and it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get this thing pulled together. It was pulled together several years ago, and we have been trying to get it approved for that long. In the meantime, because we met so many obstacles here at City Hall, we've lost Dunkin' Donuts. We were ecstatic to find someone that owned Dunkin' Donuts that was willing to locate there. And we looked long and hard for Wendy's and Pizza Hut, and we're very happy to have them. We don't want to lose either. Now, we may lose the grant, the federal grant for the Dunkin' Donuts, because you have 5 years. And we are up next year on the first federal grant that we received for Pizza Hut, Wendy's. We need to move on this. We can't just take our time. The second grant was awarded the next year, so it is up in 2020. I do the reports for the grants, and I hate to see us lose this money. I don't think Wyandotte County can afford to lose this money that the federal government is willing to award to establish business in an area that receives no tax dollars and bring in employment and food service off a highway. I think, we need to get this moving. It's been going on way too long. And if we want to keep Pizza Hut, Wendy's, we need to do it now rather than wait any longer. Like I say, we lose this grant next year. So it's time to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the members of the audience that chose to speak this evening. If there's any other comments, we need to take no action on this. This is for presentation only. So with that, if there's no other questions, Mr. Stevens, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we close?
I don't believe so unless there are any questions from the commission.
I do. I have one final comment to make. I would request that on the October 29th meeting, this be put on the agenda, first on the agenda, with a development agreement. Whether Mr. Bach and his staff think it's a good idea or not, it's the commission's job to review those development agreements, ask questions, and make that decision. Otherwise, like I said, I really don't see any purpose of a commission if we aren't reviewing and deciding for ourselves whether or not those agreements are good agreements or not. So from what I understand, to end on a more positive note, there seems to be, as I said in the beginning, 3 sticking points. 2 of those 3 sticking points have been agreed upon verbally. There is one remaining sticking point, and it's not a disagreement as much of it as it's a procedural issue in the way and how the tax rebate works, which you can learn more about later if you're interested. So I've been assured by Mr. Bach that in the next 28 days, if I'm wrong, correct me, there should be a development agreement on the table for a vote. So on October 28th, I just want a response that Mr. Bach, that we'll have a development agreement and no longer will any of us nor the community be wasting their time constantly bringing this in front of the standing committee for just informational purposes, that we'll actually have an agreement, whether you like it or John likes it or no one likes it, it's for the commission to vote on. I'm asking for a commission vote.
And I would, in answering that question, I would just clarify, and I always try to be very transparent in everything that comes before the governing body, which is why in not putting the development agreement on the agenda this evening, I spelled out the issues. And I could have brought forward, I guess, a development agreement that said there was no TIF cap, that we were not going to be consistent with our local minority and women-owned business requirements, and that we were going to put a provision on there that we weren't sure was legal, but we weren't willing to agree to that. And I think that is my job as the county administrator, to vet through items to make sure what you would vote on would be something, as you asked me at the question at the beginning of the meeting about a rebate, that I had a high confidence in, that we were actually putting a legal agreement in front of you. It does appear we've worked through all those components, and we will have this ready to go out with the agenda. And it's also been a very clear directive of this committee that we don't put blue sheeted development agreements back in front of you. I think you've beat me up on that a few times for bringing those type of agreements forward. So if those are provisions that I'm not supposed to abide by, then I can change that way, but it's certainly not ones of tainted to the deal. They're just clear deal points of structural components that have to be there in order for you to make a decision, or I would be presenting a deal that could fall on its face very easily. So I believe we have everything ready, and we should be there with the team.
So I might understand that we'll have this on the agenda next month.
For a vote.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I appreciate the input in the discussion this evening. Commissioner McGee, as a commissioner at large, I would look forward to the opportunity to visit with you and learn more about the project. If we can be of assistance, we work better collectively. And so that I appreciate the statements made this evening. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Motion been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.